Welcome back to the Christopher Valentine Show. Today's special guest is Dr. Christian von Lahr. And Christian, you wanted to go into some other types of nature spirits and what they look like, right?
Well, yeah, as we mentioned, there are many kingdoms and types of nature spirits. One that we haven't spent much time on just yet are fairies. And it's interesting that women connect with fairies much easier than men. But yet men can. It must have something to do with the energy. You know, there's a duality in life, and we have a male side and a feminine side. And actually there was a form of life, or our own life, when we were all one sex. Humankind actually was androgynous at one time. This goes to the older stories of Adam and Eve. But that duality, I think women resonate more to that feminine aspect of nature spirits that we call fairies. But you know what's interesting, Chris, is there are as many male fairies as there are female. And whenever I see a fairy, first of all, I know there's at least 10 to 100 because they come in great big groups. And if you look, you're going to see that there's all these men dressed up to the nines.
Why aren't they in the paintings? There's always...
I don't know. I think the women are just picking up on they may feel something like that affinity, you know.
Well, the characteristic of fairies that you just touched on is they do dress very, very well. Fairies are the sowers of the nature spirit community, including the very special privilege and task of sewing the leprechaun vests that leprechauns wear for a very special reason.
Boy, I want to get one of those. But you know, what I've noticed when I and fairies are like the second or third nature spirit I saw, I've noticed they have extremely long noses, and they have very long fingers. So if you're trying to decide, did I see a fairy or a brownie or a greenie or gnome or elf, look for that characteristic. The long-fingered gnomes are the fairies.
And you know what I notice about fairies when I see them, and I usually do see the female ones easier, is they have these big hoop skirts, big dresses, and their inner light, of course, is coming out of them, and it's usually pastel colors. So
now you see, you're doing the same thing that you mentioned that the women do when they resonate with it. But you know, those fairies, they're bringing colors to plants, and they're bringing in scents. They're bringing harmony and beauty to nature. I mean, they have a lot of genuine, real work.
There are male fairies with the
because
hats.
If they didn't do that, you know, you have bees that have to be attracted to those flowers, and other insects, which are sort of the bottom of the food chain. So fairies have a very important role. But what's neat, though, is when they communicate, and you wouldn't have expected this, when we start talking to them, they give you really profound answers, great big answers. Now, nature spirits communicate telepathically, which means you don't have to be psychic. It sort of comes in here. So when you see like a gnome out there on the bush, and it's better with the lights are a little low, and you have some Christmas lights on trees like we have behind us. If you see a gnome, and you can often see them in bushes that are like green, that are deep green, that has some red flowers since they wear these colors, when you see one, don't just stand there, because they tell us when they see you noticing them, they're doing the same thing. And everybody's standing like this and nobody's moving, okay? And so you gotta wave and ask them to say something or move so you know you have a real experience.
Yeah, you know, it takes nature spirits a lot of energy for them to show themselves to you. Remember, nature spirits are not as dense as you and I. They're made of an etheric matter, very, very light, lighter than air.
You meant their matter wasn't as dense.
Yeah, well, exactly.
Because I can get pretty dense sometimes. And of course, fairies, of all the nature spirits, they tend to be the brighter. So that inner glow you mentioned when we opened, we often speak of fairies that way because it's literally like they have a flashlight inside of them. And what about the wings on fairies?
Well, they can have numerous sets of wings, and
that could be etheric matter too, by the way.
Yes.
Or it could be something physical. But since nature spirits are made of etheric matter, that is their matter. It's just that it can be very fine and gossamer-like. And so sometimes people see wings and some people don't. And sometimes people see extra sets of wings.
Yes.
People don't realize that nature spirits have greater variety than we do. This one kind of human, 6,000 kinds of nature people and nature spirit. And we haven't even talked about two other amazing ones. What about the water and the fire? There's something called salamanders, and it took me years how to teach people how to see salamanders.
Not lizards, mind you. These are nature spirits of the flame or fire.
This is where the source of magic. The element of fire, when we think of correspondences, brings action to things, which is why it's used in magic. But if you want to see the nature spirit of the flame, you have to look at a flame, like in a fireplace or a candle. Look about 8 inches up and 2 inches to the right, and you're going to see this drawn-out face. Now, it's really intriguing, but all life is trying to have this human-esque look. It's not that they're trying to look just like us. we're simply doing the same thing they are. Everything has a humanesque look in nature. Even rocks are evolving that way. And crystals and rocks do evolve. Science has proven that. It just takes a long time to watch them. But there's also Undines and Sprites of the water.
And mermaids. And
of course, but that's the higher end. But yeah, many people around 4 o'clock when the sun's sort of setting can see that sparkle and glisten above the waves. And that's actually where the sprites are actually enjoying themselves in that setting sun. And it took years also to see Undines. And it turns out, and I did this in Santa Barbara, I was almost giving up on seeing what are supposed to be large Undines. It turns out they're very large, I mean big. So I was literally falling back on the sand close to sunset, and I must have been looking like at an angle that was like 300 feet high, and then I saw hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of huge humanesque looking spirits pushing in those waves. Like when the moon actually draws the waves in and pushes it out, right? You can actually see them do that. So what did we speak of? Leprechauns.
Well, leprechauns are similar in gnomes in size, but what's important to know about nature spirits is that they can change their size. When I first started seeing gnomes, for instance, they appeared to me only 1 inch to 2 inches tall in the garden, in the branches with the nature spirit lights. Remember, it does take them a lot of energy to show themselves to you, so that's why we talk about using miniature Christmas lights like that we have behind us, because nature spirits resonate to those energies and it can help them come in more clearly for you to see them.
But changing their size, that sounds remarkable, but it's not if you understand metaphysics or some of the old wisdom from the other countries. Remember, it's kind of recent in America. But they're made of etheric matter, as you mentioned, which is lighter or less as dense as our physical matter, so they have more ability to move and adjust their size and shape.
And when they do that, they usually make themselves smaller rather than larger.
But those leprechauns still have something else going for them, besides the pipe and the British accent or the Irish accent.
Usually.
And the liking that,
in English,
the etheric matter of spirits or beer or grog, as they say it. They also work a little bit in another plane called the astral, where we dream at night. So they're distinct there. Now, pixies, where do they fit in?
Well, pixies are much closer to the earth, and they are usually on the forest floor, they said. They love the ferns, and pixies do have wings as well, but sometimes they don't, and they said when they don't, they're called greenies, greenie type pixies, because they're still green or new. And
yes.
When they give up, they actually do, there is such a thing as pixie dust.
I recall them talking about their wings changing or changing colors or growing.
It can appear as if the wings go away when they give up some of their energy to help make pixie dust.
Pixie dust, which is a connection to leprechaun dust, or perhaps fairy dust, as a lot of us think of it. Now, that actually exists. It's hard to find. It usually comes made in levels of rock where the pressure cracks some of this crystalline substance, like the chemicals that would make emeralds and beryls and things like that. Those gems, it gets sort of crystalline, it gets crushed and caught between rocks and mountains when it's dripping through, and you can pulverize that. And they actually use that to make their magical dust.
So we're talking about leprechaun dust now, and don't they have to add something a little bit extra special to activate it?
Well, the leprechauns, of course, since they actually work in the astral plane, can do something. But you know, that's sort of a spiritual concept. The only reason that we technically are alive is because we live in multiple planes of consciousness. And life itself requires that we have something going on in that astral plane that blends with us. And that's actually where we get the concept of prana. So we're not really just clones or inanimate matter. Or just material stuff. We actually have to be vivified or animated in some way also. And so that's what the leprechauns are doing. Now, doesn't it stand to reason if we're dealing with material from another dimension, it's going to have magical properties. We have 3 dimensions here, 14 up there. You put those things together and strange things can happen. Clocks stop working and suddenly they can work. The remotes get lost. Keys are blink away and 2 days later, they suddenly show up again.
That's the nature spirits trying to get your attention because they so much want to become part of your family. Leprechauns and gnomes really want to become part of your family. And so those missing items that we talked about earlier is just an example of they're trying to say, get you to say, who did that? What's going on? That is like an invitation. But you should also say when that happens, leprechauns, you are welcome to join my family. And those items will stop going missing. And
I've never known a leprechaun to say, oh, no, that's okay, that's okay.
You will have the luck of the leprechauns with you, which is a very big blessing.
All nature spirits in the world today are trying to reach out and connect with us. And people say, well, how could that possibly be? What do they want from us? Well, look at it this way. The world was theirs at one time, and we are evolving, humans, so quickly that they could go to sleep one night and wake up the next day and there's now a cement driveway on top of them. So the world is changing so quickly, they realize, okay, we're not going to be able to keep up with those big guys, so we better start getting along. So they want to come into our lives, they want to reintroduce themselves, and they will empower us, enrich us, they'll make us happier, they'll fix things as Christopher was mentioning, they'll find that inner child in us. They help you cook. They always are working. So they want to do things where they symbiotically fit into our lives as long as we give them a place to live and a job to do. So if something needs to be cooked or something needs to be fixed, or we need them to work on the computer even, give them a job and actually have a relationship going on. Has that worked for you?
That has worked perfectly. And Christian is talking about nature spirits wanting to do something good for you. And when they do all these magical things for us, it's nice if you can gift them back. And Christian, I want to thank you so much for being part of our show today.
Thank you.
You've really gone in depth and taken us to a lot more knowledge about the nature
That was
spirits.
the plan behind the books. You know, I am a clairvoyant, a psychic, a medium, but we can see other realms of life, not just the humankind. There's a lot of things going on there. And so when you ask me, could we see nature spirits, the answer is yes. And Christopher and I have worked out so many techniques, which the books speak of, so we can show you how to see them, we can show you how to talk to them, and you can have experiences of your own.
Well, thank you so much for joining me. If you'd like more information, visit my website, www.christophervalentineshow.com.
And the books can also be purchased at MrTheOracle.com, and we have a whole series of those. And on the cover, if you'll notice, the cover of this book, this was the first gnome that came into our life, gnome Peter-Jon, and people say, but he looks like a little boy. And that's the message we want to leave you with. Yes, they look like you and I, and they're very pure looking, very innocent looking, because they haven't grown up to this extent that we have, and they will look like little children mostly. So when you see them older with the beard, they're actually pretty old, you know?
Yeah, they live very, very, very long lives. That's why a lot of times in our past lives, we did see them, and we've worked with them before, and they so much want to reconnect with us again. Thank you again so much, Christopher, for joining us.